Okay, so if this stuff's up, then the world is against us. I've absolutely decided that.
Well, we already knew that.
Yeah. What is going on, everyone? It has been Lone Vault Wanderer, and I'm here with Chris Avellone after a failed recording and many internet issues. We were actually talking for 30 minutes before my OBS software crashed. But I have Chris Avellone here, narrative designer, writer in video games. He's worked on games such as Fallout New Vegas and Wasteland 2. Chris Avellone, how you going, mate?
I'm doing great, and thank God those 30 minutes got deleted. Oh my God, there was so much good information.
I know.
I was saying way too much like that. Well, thank God that's just between us, right?
No one's ever going to hear it. You know, that thing you told me about that game you're working on, that's all secret.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah. So yes, that did stuff up, but we're going to start from the start. I got a bunch of questions for Chris, but we're not going to be calling this an interview. We're going to be calling this just a chat. Right, Chris, because I said that before. Yeah,
it's just a friendly chat. Like, there's no recordings. This won't go up on the internet. I mean, did we agree on that? Like, I forget.
Did I not tell you about this?
It's not important. It's not important. It's just a friendly chat.
Exactly. But we will be talking about a bunch of different things throughout this chat, including Pathfinder Kingmaker, the game that Chris Avellone is working on next. I'm going to be including the Kickstarter link in the description below, so please go check that out. We'll be talking about that kind of midway through this chat. But let's just start off with talking about Chris's past projects and just seeing, Chris, how are you going? How have you been in the past couple of weeks?
Wow, everything has been great. I think one great aspect about freelancing, which is hinted at the title, is the freedom. Mm-hmm. And so I've had the ability to work on a wide range of franchises and also work with a wide range of people that I've always wanted to work with. And sometimes it's a matter of, just reaching out, or, sometimes more surprisingly, like with Prey, they reach out to me and go, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" And that's ends up being a wonderful marriage of game development. It works out very well.
So I do want to ask you about that. You're working at Obsidian, of course, and then you decide to go out freelancing. Can I ask you just first of all, moving from within a traditional game studio to becoming a freelancer, why did you make that choice, and how did that go about?
Well, it's. I think after a while, there's certain aspects about working in a studio full time that can be challenging on the creative front. And this has been growing for a while. There's certain restrictions, obviously, which makes sense because of the corporate culture. You could never go investigate another franchise. You could never really reach out to a developer unless there was like a codified agreement, like between like Obsidian and In Exile, and that agreement was largely any of Chris's work on Exile, that will go over to Obsidian, payment wise, which helps them out. But overall, like it's sort of constraining, and then also there's the mechanisms in a full-time studio that sometimes can be kind of challenging. And so one example I'll give you is, and to be clear, like I'm on my projects, like my producers were always very accommodating about this because I'd like to think that I explained it well. But overall, part of your job as a writer or artist or programmer is sometimes you need a lot of uninterrupted time to complete a certain task. Like, supposing you're writing a companion, supposing you're writing a major NPC. If that flow gets disrupted, that character gets a little broken, whether you realize it or not, because your flow is kind of off. And the tone might be broken, the scripting might be broken. And so what I would request, and it's what I request on every project that I move on to, is although it is a lot less of an issue, is, hey, if we ever have any like meetings or updates, if we ever actually need to have a meeting, can we clump it to one day during the week? Just group them all together. I'll give you whatever information you need, provided that information cannot be communicated through an update or email by me and incorporated into whatever system you have for tracking tasks. And it could be a variety of things. But overall, I want to be largely creative. I don't want to be telling people what I'm doing all the time. I just want some simple system that makes them happy about what's going on and updates them. I don't want too much of the let's sit in a room with, 8 or 10 expensive leads for an hour or 2 hours talking about what we're doing, because you can put a price tag on that. And especially like when it happens multiple times during the week, you're just like, no, I really don't think we need to meet this often. And also it's not productive. It doesn't help the game get done. It just passes information off versus actually getting content implemented. So it's a balancing act.
So, in that fabled forgotten podcast that is just broken, you were telling me about your involvement with Prey and how it all started, and that you were actually approached when you were still working at Obsidian, and then once you started freelancing, you got involved with Prey again. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so first Raph reached out, and then Raphael is one of the co-owners of Arcane Studios, along with Harvey, and so Raph reached out. It's like, you know what? I'm a big fan of your work. I was wondering if you might have some free time to help us work on our new title, and I was like, well, I can't. I'm full time at this other studio. But then once I was freelancing, I'm like, well, I wonder if that offer's still open. So then I dropped the line to Raph. He's like, absolutely. So we met at E3. We talked really quickly. He's like, yeah, everyone seems cool on it on the ZeniMax and Bethesda side. So let's do this.
Wow.
And then they flew me out to the actual studios in Austin, Texas. They gave me the rundown of the story, the characters. They gave me an introduction to 2 of the character briefs for side characters that I could potentially write. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'd love to give this a shot, and I'll apply my RPG sensibilities to these characters. And I did. And the lead writer, lead designer, Ricardo Bear, who's great, by the way, he's a fantastic boss. I almost worry he's too nice, but but he was always very clear about what he wanted, and that was a refreshing change of pace. I'm like, wow, God, that's all. Really, that's really all I want. I just want to make someone happy. So I did those 2 characters. He really liked them. I was a little worried. I'm like, oh God, is this setting the right tone? Like, this is my first try at this. Yep. And he's like, oh no, these are great. And I have more characters for you. And I'm like, oh, really? You have more characters?
Here's more.
And then just kept working from there. But I did a lot of the like side quest characters, like and only if the listeners have actually played the game, but like Dr. Igwe, Sarah Elazar, Michaela, Danielle, Abigail, which, by the way, was my first attempt to write a lesbian romance, and I normally don't do those things because romance bothers me, not because of any gender issues. Like, it's just romance. I'm like, ugh, romance. But then I got intrigued by it because then Ricardo said, oh, by the way, it's after their I don't want to spoil anything. Shit. I'm sorry. You know what? Nothing.
Are you going to stop?
I was like, damn it.
I really did enjoy that romance too. So maybe it is best that we leave people to enjoy it on their own.
It was, it was, yes, there was that particular challenge. Dang, I almost spoiled it. Wow, I almost did the thing that I hate.
Should put a spoiler warning on this video. But we were talking about before that one of my favorite characters was Dr. Igwe. Can you tell me about your work with working on that character?
Yes. So Ricardo had Ricardo was great about giving me like 2-page biography sheets and going, well, here's where this character appears, here's their rough general background, here's how we'd like them to be portrayed in the game. Yep. And Igwe, and this isn't really any spoilers, but Igwe is in the unfortunate position of being ahead of his time. Like, he's advanced theories that the scientific community considers pretty much laughable. And also he's kind of socially inept. So, which, sounds stereotypical, but there's ways that sort of, creates repercussions in the world of Prey. Anyway, Igwe is like very socially awkward, I guess is the most polite way to put it. However, when doing the voice acting, the voice actor, who unfortunately I apologize, I cannot. I should have looked up his name before the podcast. he walks in, I'm like, oh my God, this guy must not have any socialization problems, because this guy, like, he's very confident, walks very tall, like, he's obviously like works out all the time. I'm just like, you know what, if I didn't have a girlfriend, I'd probably, say something. And then I'm like, well, I wonder if this guy can pull it off, because like I feel like he's coming from a much different place than the actual character. And then like of course he gets in the lines and like it's complete, he completely nails it. And usually what the problem usually I have with some voice actors is if it's kind of a gamble, you might like have 7 or 8 takes of a line, which takes a lot of time in the studio, which is very expensive. Like this guy was nailing it out, like maybe like 2 lines he'd have it like That's easy. Brilliant. And so like absolutely professional, absolutely great to work with. It was just an easy experience. So no, he did a really good job, and I thought he communicated Igwe's inherent vulnerabilities of being ahead of his time, but needing validation desperately to restore his confidence. He did a really good job of conveying that.
That's awesome. But overall, how do you think Prey turned out? I don't believe you played the retail version, but you've played it a lot, obviously, during your development time. How do you think the game turned out overall?
Yeah, no, it seems to be very well received. And when I was playing it, so part of the responsibilities of being a narrative designer / writer on a game is you just play through your levels where even your temp VOs placed, or your logs are placed, and you try and get a sense to make sure that your writing is actually being paced properly.
Yeah.
And if you need to move it around, like if there's some segments that don't work, like if you have too much of a speech before a boss encounter, and then that's likely to kill the player, that's going to wear them out. Like be careful with all that stuff. Like make the story introduction, especially in FPS, make that a little bit easy for the player to digest and ration it out. And so that's why I'd played the game like numerous times to actually figure out if that pacing was working or not. And that's just part of the job.
It's interesting we played Prey too, because when I played it on a slightly harder difficulty because I was pressured into it. But just generally, you play that game on normal. It's a quite difficult, challenging game. And was there a bit of a fear that because of that difficulty curve with Prey as a game, that would that disrupt the narrative at all?
That's a good question. It depends what type of player it is. I know that like even some RPGs, like even with Dragon Age, they'll include like a story mode where like, oh, by the way, everything's like scoped down in difficulty. And because you can change difficulty settings, like it's not usually an issue. So if you do want to play it just for the experience, you can. I wasn't really too worried about that. No.
Fair enough. All right, well, before we move on to your work with Pathfinder Kingmaker, I think my fans would kill me if I didn't ask you a little bit about Fallout. And specifically, I wanted to ask you about Fallout New Vegas. So before we start talking about it, can you actually just clarify how you started working on Fallout New Vegas and the actual role that you had within the team?
Yeah, so I came into the middle of Fallout New Vegas's development. Like, I'd worked on some of the initial pitch information to Bethesda, like, hey, here's potentially the storyline for the game, here's the setup, here's how the character starts the game, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, I was working on other things until those came to a resolution, like halfway through New Vegas's development. I moved over as a narrative designer to New Vegas because it already had a project director. And then once I was there, I worked on major NPCs like, the Legate, for example. I worked on companions for the game, like Rose of Sharon Cassidy. I worked on, Ulysses as a companion before he got moved to the DLCs. Like all that stuff was stuff. And I worked on a lot of the DLC content, except for Honest Hearts, which I mostly, played through and asked for, introductions. Like, hey, can you do foreshadowing for this or foreshadowing for that? Which, was sort of on-off included. But
So overall, though, I guess looking back with the benefit of hindsight, would there be anything in New Vegas that you would do slightly differently?
Well, that's a good question. So with New Vegas, the things that I would do differently are a few things, and they would be actually major things that I would change. First off, is I think that there wasn't balance between how the factions were represented. Like there was a lot of NCR and not so much of Caesar's Legion. And also the representation of any sympathetic points between the two factions, like those two factions in particular, those weren't as evident enough to cause the player to pause in choosing, which I think is the important thing. Like if you get a selection of factions in a role-playing game or any game, you should actually be tempted to join them for some reason.
Yeah.
And Caesar's Legion did not have any of that temptation, at least from my perspective. I'm like, wow, there's nothing being portrayed here that's overtly positive. They're just bad guys.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. And then, so I would have changed that. I'm like, let's highlight some of the positive things this faction is doing and how they're actually more suited to the Fallout universe than, say, NCR, who, I did my best to communicate is like, incompetent. Their supply lines are messed up. They can't protect the merchants and the supply lines. And this is something I tried to do with the companion Rose of Sharon Cassidy, where she initially is like a full-on, NCR is the way to go. But then the more you talk to her about it, she's like, well, but they kind of messed this up and they kind of messed that up. And, one good thing about the Legion. And then she starts going in all the good stuff the Legion starts doing.
Wow.
Inadvertently. And those are my favorite moments to write, because the person that absolutely supposedly supports the other faction and knows all their faults, if they can point out the positives in the other faction and realize what that would have meant for them personally, like, because, Rose of Sharon Cassidy, this isn't any spoilers, in the game, like, her caravans just keep getting attacked and attacked. But that wouldn't have happened if she had been working her caravans within Caesar's Legion. They keep the roads safe.
Wow.
So that would have changed her entire life. And I think points like that to introduce are important. And I don't think that the faction introduction was balanced. And then also, I probably would have changed the foundation for some of the companions. Like, and don't get me wrong, like, I like the companions in New Vegas, but part of me was always wondering, hey, is there a way to take these companions and make them more tied in the storyline, like in important ways? Like, what if you did take Yes Man as a companion? Like, what if you did take Vulpus from Caesar's Legion as companion, and then he gives a voice to the Legion, while you're traveling, gives perspective, like all that stuff. I think would have made the conflicts in the game stronger, because you have a mouthpiece for those different perspectives traveling with you all the time and reminding you. And also they were great characters. So I'm like, wow, it sucks you couldn't have Benny in your party or Yes Man or Vulpus. I really think they would have been great companions.
And also as well, in not just really having companions for companions' sake, that they actually, they were with you and contributed to the story and the narrative in a meaningful way.
No, I know, I totally agree. And I think that when you have layers like that, the player obviously can pick and choose, but when they're traveling with you all the time, that just reinforces the main arc of the storyline and the main theme of the game.
Brilliant. Okay. And I want to ask you about your work with the DLC on New Vegas. What was your favorite DLC that you worked on?
So my favorite DLC was actually Dead Money. The one that I thought was going to get panned pretty bad was actually Old World Blues. So I'm like, oh wow,
and it didn't.
It might be too goofy for people, and we know how. And I was still having like flashbacks from Fallout 2 where we did get too goofy, and we were rightfully like lashed for that. We're like, that did not go over well with the Fallout fans. We're like, what, this game is just, it doesn't feel like the first one, and they were absolutely right. It didn't feel like the first one because a lot of the principal shareholders had unfortunately gone away. Yeah. So we were like, okay, well now we have to flesh this out, and I think it could have benefited from some creative direction, but that unfortunately didn't happen. Just it might have been timeline, it might have been hierarchy, whatever it was. But that all factored into it. Anyway, back to the DLCs. But yes, I really enjoyed working on Dead Money because I always wanted to do like a survival horror game. Old World Blues was fun, but I thought that it would get destroyed in the fan reception. But then the reverse was true, and then I'm like, oh well, that's actually something that I can take away from this that I've learned. Where I'm like, what? The audience doesn't mind humor. Like, in fact, and I should have known this from like the Saints Row series, like they like it. They like it when the developers are having fun along with you. Like, that just makes everyone else feel better. We should know this from like the South Park game too. Like, people are people are playing a game to have fun. Doesn't always need to be like grimdark where everyone's like, oh my god, he killed my family. Oh no. Oh, well, I guess they killed my family, but at least I'm free of that. God, I hated marriage and the kids were annoying. Like, use the comedy for what it's worth. I mean, I thought that was, so that was a good learning experience. But I did not expect it to be received so well.
That's interesting. And that's the thing with Fallout. I mean, it's set in this post-apocalyptic, dire wasteland where people are fending for themselves, but it has this underlying comedy about it that I think is kind of refreshing. Like, for instance, I'll compare with another game that I've played that I'm not sure if you have, but Metro. I love that game, but it's a very dark, deep game that I can only play for a couple of hours and then I need to step away from. But Fallout is a bit more lighthearted, and I think Old World Blues, I don't know, it might have just resonated with Fallout fans.
I think part of the original direction for Fallout 1 just contained what I consider to be quote unquote Tim Kane's dark humor, where he finds a number of things very funny that I think a lot of people do, but then after laughing, they get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and I think
tell me more, Chris.
That's pretty dark. I don't know if Tim needs to talk to somebody, but if you're out there, Tim, if you can call me anytime you want, we'll just chat. But I think that dark humor was is sort of the essential part of Fallout. Like, if you don't have those aspects where it's occasionally parodying what it's, the grim darkness of it, and you don't have for example, the Vault Boys merrily charging into all sorts of horrific situations, and that's just the way it is. That's how the universe is set up. That's just sort of key to Fallout. And I think the humor in Old World Blues tried to emulate some of that, but I don't know if it fully succeeded. I think that it was coming more from a Venture Brothers humor sadness place where, the time of Johnny Quest is gone, and now you have all this wreckage of everything left behind, which is still funny, but it still makes you think, wow, there was a golden age once upon a time. It's just that, it all just got messed up. Yeah, so it's both funny and sad. So
okay, well, look, I'm going to be asking you more questions about Fallout when we get to the fan questions that I've generated from Twitter, but I want to ask about your current work with Pathfinder Kingmaker. So I think it was about 3 weeks ago you announced your involvement with the game. Can I actually get your specific role within the Owlcat team with Pathfinder?
Yeah, so Owlcat actually reached out to me and they're like, hey, are you interested in doing an RPG? And I'm like, well, what RPG? And they're like, Pathfinder. I'm like, yes, I would love to work on a Pathfinder. I actually have been trying to get a Pathfinder RPG going for quite some time, which the CEO of Paizo can attest to. She called me a matchmaker. It's like, oh, Chris has been trying to matchmake us for quite some time. And I'm like, yeah, oh my God, that is what I'm doing. I never thought I'd be in that role. Oh my God. I'm like, okay.
Sounds amazing. Chris Avellone, matchmaker.
It's still surprising to me. I mean, I should get it put on business cards. So anyway, so they said Pathfinder. I'm like, yep. Because I played Pathfinder in the years previous. Yeah. And I actually recall the campaigns quite fondly. They weren't adventure paths like Paizo usually turns out for Pathfinder. Adventure paths are like these huge epic modules that they turn out. But this is actually like a homebrewed campaign, which is like an Ocean's 11 style Pathfinder heist scenarios, which, by the way, we were not very good at pulling off heists. But it still was a lot of fun during the adventure sessions to actually try and do it. So that was when we played during our lunch break, and we had a good time with it. And I'm like, yeah, Pathfinder, that sounds great. I would love to write for it. And they're like, well, we would love for you to write for us. And that's how everything happened. And that's how easy freelancing is. Sometimes you're like, yeah, I would love to do that. And they're like, well, we'd love you to do it. That's actually, Chris, why we're asking. Are you okay? I'm like, yes, I'd love to do it. I have the brain of a fish.
Sorry, what did you just say? Oh, you want me to work on Pathfinder? Hell yeah.
What did I just sign? Oh, great.
That's brilliant. But I want to ask you, though, because Pathfinder was a series or a franchise that I personally wasn't familiar with when I saw, I think it was a PC Gamer article that's like, Chris Avallone's new RPG is going into Kickstarter. I'm like, what? Chris Avallone's writing a new RPG? But then I understood it. So can you tell me about Pathfinder? What exactly is it and where did it start?
Yeah, so Pathfinder was actually a branching off of the 3.5 Dungeons & Dragons rule set. And to explain to listeners out there, so obviously D&D, well, I just said obviously, even though I'm trying to talk like I'm introducing this. Wow, really great, Chris. So D&D went through a number of editions. And one of the most popular editions was actually the third edition, 3.5 rule set, it's called. It seemed to hit all the right notes with people. Players really liked it. And then Wizards of the Coast announced they were going to do a fourth edition. but I don't think everyone was ready to leave 3.5 behind yet.
Yeah.
So Pathfinder was the result of that, because the company that does Pathfinder, Paizo, I believe they used to do the Dragon Magazine publications for Wizards, but then I think that contract got canceled. And they're like, you know what? Well, we could just do adventures. But I think they wanted to do something that was more in the style of 3.5. So they actually made a brand new world, brand new rules, like just, hey, you know what? We're just going to go off and do Pathfinder, which will be, our version of a fantasy RPG. And that resonated really well with a lot of people because they still wanted to keep playing like 3.5 compliant Dungeons and Dragons. So that occurred. A lot of people really liked Pathfinder. They thought it was a really great role-playing game system. Wizards went on to have success with 4th and 5th edition D&D, so that worked out well for them. But yeah, Pathfinder was an interpretation of some stuff that some really classic D&D players liked and wanted to keep doing, and they did a really good job with it.
Okay, so can you tell me about the actual game itself? I know that it's still very early stages, but what can Kickstarter backers expect with this game when it finally releases?
Well, actually, it depends on the backers, and I think that's why we went to crowdsourcing. The idea was that we've got a great foundation for a game. There's more we'd like to add to it, but obviously, resources are limited. So, but then we're like, well, we could ask the public what they like to see and what things that they're interested in contributing to.
Yeah.
So we went to Kickstarter and like, you know what? We have the foundation here, but here are some elements we'd really love to add to the title if we can get your support. And like, for example, so not that it's a spoiler from the title, but for example, in Kingmaker, you actually get to build and rule a kingdom. And what we'd like to do is expand those mechanics as much as possible. But to do that requires a pretty large resource investment. And so we figured, you know what, if the audience really wants to see these elements, why not just ask them? So that's what crowdsourcing is for, and a lot of the crowdsourcing elements for Kingmaker involve, hey, we'd like to add more to this kingdom that you build. We'd like to add royal artisans, who can build artifacts for you, new events to weave into the kingdom, new ways to develop the kingdom, all these things to actually make it more of a strangely enough, make your kingdom kind of a companion in your party, and you can see all your reactivity reflected there. And we'd really like to see that feature implemented. We just need a little help with it. And that's what the crowdsourcing is for.
And I think you've done very, very well so far. I mean, it's been, 2 days? And last I checked, on Kickstarter, you've raised about $320,000. And you're about to, but your overall goal is about $500,000. And I think you'll easily succeed that with many more days to go in the campaign.
Yeah, no, the backers have been really supportive. So I'm like, okay, wow. I was a little worried I might be alone in the Pathfinder love, but that has not been the case. And that's been really reassuring to see that amount of support for the backers.
That's brilliant. So can I ask you though, Pathfinder Kingmaker, top-down isometric RPG, seems like a game that Fallout fans, and especially as I was listening to the pitch video, there was a lot of talk about magic spells and items and choice, etc. So it would seem to be a game that Fallout, Elder Scrolls fans and similar games would actually like. What do you think that fans of those franchises would actually like with Pathfinder Kingmaker?
Well, first of all, I think they love the character development that you get in Pathfinder. You get a lot of ways to customize your character. Also, another advantage is that if you enjoy the companions that you find in Fallout or the Elder Scrolls, you actually get more of them in this particular RPG. The only challenge is that if players are used to playing first person, Pathfinder is definitely an isometric RPG, so it's more of a tactical, a camera looks down the environment, and then you move your characters across that. So that, as long as you don't mind those types of games, that works out great. I think they would enjoy it. I think they'd love the world, all the depth and complexity you'd see in other RPGs, you'll definitely see in Kingmaker, if not more.
That's brilliant. So I wanted to ask you this question, and I thought about this one very, very hard.
Oh my God.
I know, I apologize.
Treat.
It seems that a lot of the games that you've worked on, whether it is Pathfinder, whether it is Fallout, whether it is Wasteland, a lot of the games that you work on and you write for, you're coming into this kind of pre-established story with, already existing characters and setting and its story, narrative, etc. How difficult is it for you creatively to write for a video game that already has everything kind of pre-established, and you're kind of asked to, hey, write this character or write this side quest? Is that challenging for you to not write for a game that you haven't concepted from the ground up?
No, actually, it's always challenging. Like, even if it wasn't an established franchise, arguably without an established franchise, it can potentially be much more work, because every character you create is actually informing the lore of that brand new world. The challenge with an existing franchise is, okay, well, I have to understand the context of what makes this franchise great. What sort of things have already been done this franchise that I don't replicate, or duplicate, or seem like I'm a lesser image of this particular quest line or the storyline. Like, you have to be aware of all that stuff. But after that, once you have a grounding in what that franchise is, like why players like it, then it becomes sort of a fun puzzle to, hey, guess what? Now that I know all these things, how do I arrange all the puzzle pieces and create something brand new within the context of this environment? And that's actually a lot of fun. The last time I had a chance to do that was back at working on this RPG called Alpha Protocol, where I came in. This is going to sound like a broken record. I came in halfway through the development, and there was all these puzzle pieces lying around for, okay, well, you have these characters to choose from. They're already modeled. We largely have all their voice acting intact. So now move them around and create an RPG story. And I'm like, what? I'm like, wow, that's interesting. But then I got excited about it. I'm like, well, okay, well, now within these limitations, what can I do? And then I'm like, oh, I know what I do. And then at that point, you kind of like take off running with it, because you're like, you know what? I think it'd be interesting to do this with this character or that with that character, based on what I already know about their personalities and the context of the setting. And Pathfinder's a lot like that, with one exception, is that Pathfinder sort of prides itself on encouraging freedom of exploration and freedom in sort of the game masters to add new content to their modules and adventure paths. So we found there was a lot of places we could introduce new things, either through companions or just new evolutions of the basic like Kingmaker storyline. We're like, you know what? There is room here to do this. And it's because of how they actually constructed the sort of core Kingmaker adventure path, which is what, Kingmaker is built on.
That's brilliant. So hopefully, and I think you will, reach your goal on Kickstarter. Again, I want to be linking the Kickstarter in the description below. If you're interested in what Chris is saying, please go consider backing. I'll still need to do so in the next couple of days. But I want to start moving on to your potential future projects. Now, you might not know what you might be doing in the future, but I have to ask the question. Once your work on Pathfinder Kingmaker is all wrapped up, what is next for Chris Avellone?
Well, okay, so this is going to be a little bit of an interesting answer. So what will happen, I've discovered, is things will be silent with me for like 5 or 6 months.
Okay.
And like people won't like hear anything about me, which is great. Like, I like that. However, during 5 or 6 months, I get a lot done. And so what happens is, and this happened early this year, after the 6 months are over, suddenly you'll see like 6 projects pop up that I've been able to write for. And
wow,
that's because I have control over my time, control over the projects. It's not really that hard to manage. And it's been great. But sometimes like that means my answer to your question is that I'm actually already working on many things that will explode in the future. It's just a matter of when they get announced. So,
that is so cool.
even before Pathfinder, like even before the Owlcat guys approached me, like there was already things that I was resolving on their projects that have been announced yet. Like, so there's more stuff that's just going to be popping up just along the length of the next few years. So it's been really great. But that's what freelancing is about. You have the freedom to pursue those projects. You get to choose what you want to do on those projects. You work with people you like, and then you're like, wow, I just this is just a lot of fun. And then and then it's a matter of when it gets announced.
It seems like you are enjoying yourself much more as a freelancer because you have so much more freedom. Just tell me about that.
Well, it's a lot of things. I grew up realizing that what I loved to do was to be in my room and write.
Yeah.
It wasn't to go to a ton of meetings. It wasn't to, constantly, update my task list. It wasn't like overall, my work has just become a lot more streamlined. Like any meetings that I do have are very focused. They're usually all organized within one day during the week, so I can have all of those. I have whatever discussions need to be had on various projects. And I do emphasize need to be had because one aspect that I found very challenging was sometimes we'd have, meetings in my, various full-time jobs where it simply seemed to be that we were just having meetings for the sake of meetings. And the amount of time that gets wasted with those is considerable, especially like if you have an entire team at that meeting. I've often found that if there's any way the development team is open to it, if you can provide like an email update as to the facts, we're like, here's all the facts that I did today. And they aren't really open for discussion. They're just facts. But if you want to talk about any of them, we can have a 5-minute conversation about it. But you don't have to haul 12 people into the room of very high salaries for an hour to talk about it. I mean, it just becomes a lot more efficient. And then when you have those efficiencies, you just get to spend more time doing what you actually love. And when I was growing up, it was to, write character bios, to, design characters for role-playing games, design dungeons. And now that's just what I do all the time. So it's like my full-time happy hobby, except that I get paid for it.
That's absolutely brilliant. And I would like to ask you, being a freelancer now and having much more freedom with the games that you're able to pick and choose which ones you work on, if you could have it your way, absolutely your way, what game franchise would be the one that you would want to work on the most? Maybe it was Pathfinder before you started working on that game, but moving forward into the future, if you had it your way, what would you want to work on?
So I'm sorry, I have a very tricky answer for you. So first
off, Chris, go ahead.
it's to create a new franchise and then be part of that franchise. And I can't say what the franchise is until it's actually announced. But that has been really eye-opening. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but that has been a fantastic experience where you get in on the ground floor and you get a chance to help shape it. And you're like, wow, that was probably the most wonderful IP experience I've ever had. And I guess the short answer is creating my own franchise or helping someone else with a franchise, and that's great. So that's been fantastic.
Is there anything you can tell me about that? I understand if you need to keep silent.
I have to keep silent.
Oh, Chris, you're getting me excited now.
Sorry, good. I like you excited.
Yeah. Well, before we move on to the fan questions, all right, I have to ask this. And again, it's another one of those questions where I'll be blasted in the comments if I didn't ask this. But is there any part of you, inside of you that would like to work on the Fallout franchise one more time?
Absolutely. Yeah. Fallout is one of the best RPG franchises to write for. It's, it allows you to play around with more modern day sensibilities versus a lot of fantasy tropes like, thee and thou and oh, by the gods and by the hells. In Fallout, it's a lot more approachable in terms of like where the quests are coming from, what people's motivations are, because it's more close to the real world with obviously a metric nuclear, warlord twists, but overall, like it's just more fun to write for because it's more real worldy. I would that would absolutely be great.
So there is a related question in the fan question, so we're going to move on to that. I essentially went to Twitter, I asked everyone, just suggest your questions for me to ask Chris Avellone in this video. And one of the questions that came up was from @SarkazGamer, and he asks, if you could make a Fallout game by yourself, what would it be like and where would it be set?
Oh, wow. No, actually, strangely enough, no one has ever said by yourself.
Interesting. So this is the first. It's exclusive.
That is a very interesting question. I actually would need some time to think about that. But because most of it was like, okay, well, how would this exactly work with other development teams, the publisher, et cetera, et cetera. And that was always pretty clear because of, how the universe is set up. But on my own, I actually don't have a good answer to that question. And also, if I was on my own, I might be doing something else other than Fallout, because Fallout feels much more of a communal activity with a lot of people involved with it, including the fans and also the publisher. So it's a different set of requirements. I'm sorry to give a non-answer, but a
That's
non-answer.
fine. Absolutely fine. Well, I'll ask you a different question. Actually, two people asked very similar questions. So from at Amped Assassin, that's a tongue twister, and at Watchman64, what puts you in the mood to write a story for a video game? What are your biggest influences?
Well, actually, that okay, so the way I approach writing a game story is pretty simple, and it's actually probably different than what people expect. What I usually ask is, because I'm not usually the one actually building the game content or the engine. The engine's like, all the code that like makes the game run. For me, it's asking, what sort of feeling do you guys want in this game? Like, what's the primary gameplay mechanics? Like, even if it's just Mario, like jumping, like, oh wow, protagonist is a plumber, and that's kind of our thought for it, and he jumps really high, and there's power ups. I need to grab all those system documents and absorb everything. Go, okay, tell me all of your moment-to-moment gameplay. Tell me what sort of emotional reward you want the player to have from that. Like, survival horror is, adrenaline spikes and brief moments of relief, then adrenaline spikes, but people usually are addicted to the adrenaline spikes. But once I have those gameplay pillars, and I'm like, okay, well, now that I know the moment-to-moment gameplay, and then I also know whatever unique gameplay features they want to add. And an example of that, like in New Vegas, even though this wasn't really a unique feature, like faction reputation was really, really important in New Vegas. So if we're doing a story for New Vegas, you'd want to make sure that you are capitalizing on those reputation mechanics to highlight them on the narrative side. Like, well, that means you must have different factions. You must want players to interact with them, and they must have very, very disparate reaction states depending on whether they're hostile, whether they're friendly. All of that stuff factors in the storyline. So first thing is, grab all the gameplay documents, analyze the systems, then go, okay, well, now I have a sense of the pillars for the game, the genre for the game. Now let me do some research before I actually put anything to paper. Like, what is appealing about this genre or franchise? What do people seem to really like about it? Like, if it's Star Wars, like they like that space, then the space opera aspect. Like, what appeals to them about the franchise, and find those sort of touchstones and go, okay, now I've done all my research. I understand what the gameplay systems are going to be. Now, how would I breathe like the flesh and organs and the skeleton that I've been given, and like what actually makes the soul of this project? And then I would start writing from there, but it would be a combination of all sorts of inputs, and then usually a day of digesting all that stuff and going, you know what, I think we should go in this direction. But usually you have ideas that pop up to you during the research phase and while reading the system documents, we're like, oh, I know it would be cool here. And then you start compiling all those and going, okay, well, I got all these cool moments. Now, how do I build a framework around those? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it just keeps going from there.
Very cool. All right. And a related question, I guess, is from @Sleven HD. He asks, when was the first time you wanted to know that you wanted to write stories for a living?
Actually, it was my first game mastering session. I realized that I was really enjoying drawing the maps. I realized I was really enjoying designing sort of like the Easter eggs and little secrets that players could encounter. And I'm like, oh wow, it's like an interactive story. But I'm writing it, I'm creating it, and then it's up to somebody else to see if they can find all the things that are located within the storyline, or just find their own path, and then that becomes their story. And if there's some way I can help with it, that's great. But actually, yeah, it was my first attempt at game mastering. I realized, hey, wait a minute, this isn't quite a chore. This is actually kind of a lot of fun.
And I have to ask you this question, and I didn't put it on the document that I sent you over, so I don't know who asked it, but someone asked the question, and I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times. What advice would you give to someone that would want to work in the games industry, and specifically from your perspective as a narrative designer or a writer?
So first off, I'd ask them to choose their targets. And what I mean by that is, if you want to write for Bethesda, or if you want to write for Fallout, there's absolutely steps you can take right now towards that goal. Like, you can grab all the modding tools they give you, and you can start creating adventures. And don't get discouraged. Just keep trying it until you get something you're really proud of. And ideally, it'll be ranked pretty high on mod ratings. Enough that, because usually any developer that releases a mod tool, like we had this happen on New Vegas, for example, is you pay attention to what mods are out there, because mods usually tell you what your game doesn't have or didn't do exactly right that other people really want to see. That's very eye-opening. So if you do a really good mod, chances are the developers will notice, and they may even know who you are before you even apply. Like we had that happen in New Vegas. We had a great world builder, Jorge Salgado, who went under the name Oscuro for Oblivion. And he had just decided that, you know what, I'm going to take the Oblivion tools and I'm going to rewrite the world. He did that. He did that in his spare time, and he did all these new quests and new content, and he did it because he loved doing it. And that's another plus on an interview. We're like, wow, this person naturally wants to do this job. They're not like there just to have a job. They genuinely love this craft, and that's great. And Jorge did a fantastic job. Like, I think he got like 300,000 downloads, and he went through all the patch notes, fixed all the bugs. Like he done all the work a game developer should do, and then he applied, and we're like, oh my god, we know who this guy is. Oh my god, Oscuro applied. We're
fantastic.
Like, oh, we're freaking out, and then we're like, okay, let's just make sure he's not an asshole. Because if he's an asshole, that's the only reason we wouldn't hire him. Yeah. And we met him, and he's the nicest guy. He's like he was polite, and he might be too polite. He's too friendly, but suspicious. But anyway, no, I'm kidding. But no, he did. He was great. And then we're like, you know what? You already know the basic tools inside and out. Actually, you know more than some of our level designers do. Yeah. Let's bring you on. You seem really friendly and a great guy, and he is. And show us what you can teach us, and please help us work on New Vegas. And he did. And he did a fantastic job, and he went on to a whole bunch of other projects and also did a fantastic job.
That is such a great story.
Yeah, it's because he decided, you know what, I'm just going to use the mod tools that are out there, and I'm going to do what I want to do and entertain other people, and that's the best way to go about it.
That is a fantastic story. Just like a regular modder of Bethesda games ends up getting hired and works on New Vegas. That's fantastic. I did want to ask you slightly a different question, but talking about how, modders create the game features that they wanted to see included in those games. When you were working on Fallout New Vegas, did you ever see mods or several mods, maybe quest mods, that, put something into the game that people wanted to see and that you thought, oh, that's actually a great idea, and that maybe that was incorporated later on, or you thought just generally it was a really good idea that should have been in the game in the first place?
It wasn't necessarily any quests that I recall. What we did notice, and this actually might be indicative of all sorts of games that allow modding, is no one seemed 100% happy with their home base in New Vegas. For me, I was only unhappy because it took too many level loads to get to it. But overall, we realized, hey, wait a minute, there's a lot of home base, like stronghold mods out there.
Definitely.
That's kind of suggesting that maybe we didn't do enough with it. So analyzing all that, we're like, well, like in Old World Blues, why don't we just try and make the home base better? So that was the inspiration for a lot of the functionality for, the top of the dome in the world. It's like, you know what? There's probably a lot more that we could do, and let's just get the player an item that allows them to teleport back and forth to that location and just make it easy on them. And then we had the additional bonus of like, hey, well, now we can also add voice acting to all the appliances. So, and all of that was just to make it more fun. Yeah. And that's what we learned from the modding community. They pointed out what we weren't, sort of like where the bar needed to be raised in New Vegas, and then we were able to incorporate that into future DLCs. Going, you know what, they're right. We should do a lot more with this and make it easier for the player to access.
So directly, all of those home-based mods influenced the creation of Old World Blues. That's pretty fantastic.
Oh, we did review quite a number of them, and there's stuff from those that we either couldn't do, but even though, so we couldn't do it, but there were some that were so amazing. Like there was like one where like a guy I'm sorry, I don't recall the exact modder's name. I apologize if you're out there, who had set up all these mannequins in his home base and an aquarium. He even built an aquarium. It was crazy. But the mannequins, what they would do is they were like these fake NPC models. Mm-hmm. And what you could do is you could actually give them gear, and then that gear would appear on the mannequin. So you go to the home base and you're like, well, I collect these outfits and now I'm going to put them in my outfit storage room. And so I can actually walk down the hall and see these different outfits on models as I walk by. And that was really cool. And there was someone else who done, it might've been the same mod, who actually set up an entire room of storage containers where every single container was labeled with the type of ammo.
Yes, those are the best.
It was so brilliant. I'm just like, oh my god, that's exactly what I want.
And not only that, I mean, there are some mods. I remember using this one in Fallout 3 where you would put all your items into one kind of box, and it would auto sort everything for you into different cabinets and everything. It was just beautiful, absolutely phenomenal.
See, modders make your dreams come true.
They do, they absolutely do. Alrighty, so let's move on to the next fan question. We only got a couple left here, but this was asked again by two people. So at RazorRook and at Raleigh_ES_0701. That's a very long handle. What is your best, in your opinion, what is your best work in video games, and what's the favorite game that you've worked on?
Well, every game has challenges. So like I try to analyze it from, was my contribution effective, and did it make the overall game better? For example, with South Park Stick of Truth, so I worked on that, but interestingly enough, I didn't work on it as a designer. What I did was do production support for the cutscene pipeline, because there were some challenges there. And we're like, okay, well, we need someone to oversee this and actually smooth out the pipeline so that people can actually get, assets in the game and get the cutscenes working properly. So I sat down and did that for a few months, and that was really gratifying, because then suddenly all these people that are stalled out, suddenly they have work that they can do and progress on, and it's not going to get wasted. There are discrete steps for getting their content into the game and making sure they're actually all being productive. And I wouldn't have, and because I'm a writer, I didn't realize the gratification this particular job would have. But, a lot of the joy of being a producer is helping everybody else get their dreams into the game. And you realize at the end of the day, you've really helped people do their work more efficiently, and you've reduced their problems. And in South Park, I was really proud of that. I'm like, wow, I think I understand what makes producers happy now. That's kind of unusual. So that was, so it usually depends on the project. And I'm proud of all the projects I worked on for different reasons. Whether it's experimenting with a different story, or ambience, even though it wasn't well reviewed, or hey, well, I got to contribute to empathy mechanics on this particular title and actually design a way to make the player feel actually care about these, virtual NPCs. It all depends on the title. So it's a whole range of stuff. I'm not sure I could even just choose just one.
You've worked on so many different titles though, Chris. Just if you've ever seen your own Wikipedia page, which it must be cool to have your own, you've got this huge list of games that you've worked on. Looking back on it, does it ever overwhelm you that over the years in your career that you've worked on just so many different games, on so many well-known franchises too, like South Park, Fallout, Wasteland, etc.?
No, actually, I'm actually going to say that looking back on my resume is disappointing.
Wow, okay.
And the reason is, over the past year and a half, I believe I've worked on almost the same number of titles that I did over the past 20 years.
No way.
In much more interesting ways. And also, they've taught me a lot more. So now I look back on my resume and go, wow, every single year that I was working on this or that, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I obviously was contributing to RPG. I was doing content that I was happy with, but I could have been doing so much more and being a more well-rounded, narrative designer. And that kind of makes me sad sometimes.
Okay. That's I didn't think you were going to say that. That's a very interesting question. Okay. All right. And the last question, and look, if you don't want to answer this, Chris, you don't have to. But someone asked this, and I think 5 people upvoted him, and several people said, Lone, you have to ask me this question. So here's a question from @RickyBestie. Asked the question, if approached by Bethesda Game Studios to be the lead writer of the next Fallout, would you take the job, and why?
It would boil down to a simple question. Hypothetically, it would be, how much power will you give me over the story? Like, who do I answer to? Because
Interesting.
I have stories. Oh yes, I do. Yeah, but that would be the crux of it.
Wow.
And I will say that, based on the experience with Arcane, I don't think that would be a challenging conversation. I think it would be more of, well, explain where you're coming from, and I would explain it, and they'd go, well, that sounds good to us.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
only if you and the title is lead writer, but that sometimes doesn't mean much. You might still have to report to someone and might not have all your creative freedom. But if you had all of the freedom in the world, essentially, that would push you towards taking the job.
Yeah, actually, so if I can comment on that really quick. So I actually don't believe that a lead writer should be fully in charge of a game. And I've spoken about this before. I actually think that while story is fantastic for video games, and I think it's much more respected than people realize, it's actually the reason people come to games is actually for the gameplay. So unless the story is intertwined with gameplay, which I love to do, so it's it's a union of those things, but gameplay should always come first. And the players are playing a game because they want to play a game. They could always go read a story or watch a movie. What's going to make your story intertwine with the gameplay enough to make it compelling? And that's why I think sort of systems design is sort of the top of the hierarchy, and then level design, and then narrative guys come in at the end and go, okay, well, systems and level guys, you get your pacing and your levels worked out. I'm going to give context to all this stuff in a very exciting way. But I understand where you're coming from, and I'd like to support it. And I think that's kind of the skill a narrative designer has to develop. Because I think when a lead writer is in charge of the project, there are sometimes some danger that sometimes story can overwhelm everything.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a different kind of experience, which some people may really like. But at that point, I think it starts getting away from gameplay, which is not the reason they were there in the first place.
Yeah, it's always a tough discussion, in the games industry. I think most people would agree with you and say, yes, gameplay above anything. We are playing video games after all. But, if I were to give an answer, the games that I remember most fondly looking back, I don't necessarily remember the gameplay or what I could shoot or kill, etc. But it's always the story, and if there was a twist or if there was a great ending, that's usually what sticks in my mind. Do you find that when you play a video game, or is it more I enjoyed the gameplay more, and that's what I remember?
Actually, before I started video game, I carefully asked the people who have played it, at the end of it, will the story experience be good?
Yeah.
Because I realize I might enjoy the gameplay mechanics, but I can play a game for 15 minutes and figure that stuff out. What I want to know is if I'm going to go through the entire game, at the end of it, will I feel like that's worthwhile? And then sometimes I'll get answers like if they haven't finished it, that's also telling. Like it wasn't worth it to them to proceed. And you're like, wow, okay, that's a pretty quiet but harsh critique. But if I hear a game has a terrible ending, or it doesn't get resolved, or those things, I'm like, you know what? It's not worth the opening journey beyond the 15 minutes to figure out the mechanics for research. Overall, it's not worth even the first step on the 1,000-step journey.
Well, it's interesting because recently just finished Prey. I can't wait to see, if there will be DLC, how that story is going to get resolved. Because, Chris, there's a lot of unanswered questions in that damn story.
Prey is a very complicated story. I actually learned a lot from working on that in terms of, okay, we have this complicated aspect of the game, like whether it's technology or a creature or some situation to explain. How do we explain it? And the two solutions were, first off, it may really not be that complicated if it's less complicated than a season of Game of Thrones, but for a period of time, which actually is a real answer. I will stick by that. Yeah. The second thing is, if you genuinely think some lore aspect or creature aspect is too complicated for the player to absorb, make a quest around it and have the player have to understand that quest lore to accomplish the quest, and do it in stages. Like, hey, here's the first thing you realize. Oh, wait, that leads to this, leads to that. And then you walk them through it, but it's actually part of the interactive experience versus just an exposition dump.
Awesome. Well, Thank you so much, Chris. We've pretty much reached exactly an hour, and I was secretly kind of aiming for that because it looks great. But honestly, thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for putting up with internet issues and a failed recording. I mean, most people would have gone by now.
No worries at all. Hey, thanks for reaching out. It was an absolute pleasure. And and thank you for sending the questions for me to actually be able to read through and go, okay, can I think of any anecdotes from my old tired brain that might actually be things that are helpful? Yeah, but no, I really appreciate that. So thank you.
No, I'm really glad that you had a good time. So yes, if you're still listening at this point, please go check out the Kickstarter for Pathfinder Kingmaker. Honestly, I think it's going to get funded, but Chris, I hope it gets funded for your sake and you're able to create the game that you want. And hopefully we hear more about your secret projects that you won't tell me about sometime soon.
And I'd be happy to be on the podcast again once those things are announced. Yeah, that would be fantastic. I wish I could say something.
That's okay. No, you know what? That's a great reason for me to email you again and say, hey, Chris, it's about time you got back on. No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much again, Chris. Thank you so much to everyone for watching until this point. And until next time, this has been Lone Vault Wanderer, and I'll see you then.